Thanks again, and thanks a lot for the invitation. It's the first time in Estonia for me as well. I arrived yesterday at night. In the morning, I had a nice walk through Tallinn. I'm looking forward to see more of it on the weekend, but not as much as I look forward to the rest of this conference, which has been amazingly interesting so far. If that changes now, that's on me. I prepared some remarks, but I have the advantage that most of the things I wanted to say or to point out already have been said, and much better and more scientifically sound than I ever could. So yes, I have the luxury of to have a bit time to stray far from my notes, and you have the possibility to pretend like you don't notice that maybe slides and my words don't fit completely. I've this small structure. I want to shed some light on my perspective, where I come from, where I stand with my project. But while the nuts and bolts of the German daycare system are awfully interesting, I can assure you that I don't think that I will dive into that too deep, but to continue with some generally and more personal remarks, which will inform you on the perspective and approaches we also use within our project. So yes, it was already mentioned. I at the moment I'm with the umbrella organization for the Catholic daycare centers. We have with us like roughly 1/5 of all daycare centers in Germany, so we are the biggest organization of our kind. Even if I don't want to go into the details, it's probably important to point out that the children and families in these centers or in our centers are, of course, accepted independently of their religion. The institution is Catholic, or the institutions are Catholic. The families don't have to be, in theory, the families can choose which center or which institution they prefer for their children. In practice, we have a lack of vacancy throughout the country. So at the moment, it's more or less a question of where do you get a vacancy for your child. I've prepared only one slide from my daily work. We did a survey this year in June with our educators. We had the opportunity to ask around about 5,000, a bit more than 5,000 of them, some questions, and one of them was on the number of family languages. Family language is well defined, that is a language a child will speak at home with one or with at least one family member. So a child can have 2 or even 3 family languages, and we simply asked them to add them up. And the results surprised even me, since it showed that if you add up, half of our colleagues work in institutions with 6 or more family language, 2/3 with 5 or more. And this is interesting to notice, since the public debate in Germany up until now, or at least some years ago, was if Germany is a country of immigration or not. And I think that this is a statistic that shows that in practice this has been answered for quite some time. And yes, that also forms a bit the perspective of my remarks, since I think laws and the international rules, children's rights, and such, on which we base our work, completely support our approach, and it's more public opinion. It's more mentality, maybe, or societal structures that we have to struggle with and to overcome and to change to succeed with our goals. So yes, we already heard possibilities of different notions of the term integration, and I've brought one slide from a survey done by the Bertelsmann Foundation in the last year. They had a representative sample and asked which preference concerning integration is shared the most. And the idea that migrants should assimilate is most popular, with half of the population in the western part of Germany, the eastern part even 60%. Looks rather bleak. I think that the methodology of this survey has to do with this, because they only asked this one question. Now, that's not just this chart is taken from broader research and represents only one question. And of course, integration and the personal view on integration is much more complex. And always has to, or you would have to try to get a representative view. You'd have to try to ask more concrete, more differentiated questions than simply to ask which one of these 4 possibilities you would prefer. Okay. The keynote today already pointed out which understanding of integration we would prefer. And it's clear that it can only be measured as the same rights and means to participate. We generally speak of Teilhabe in German. The dictionary gives participation as translation. I don't think that's too precise, since Teilhabe points more to rights and means to participate, independently of if you use these rights and means and in fact participate. So if I speak of participation, it means this this slightly different notion. If you look on this from a perspective of education, you could ask if there is any difference to the concept of inclusion. Concept of inclusion, which generally says the education systems has to address the individuality of the children or young people or even elder people within the system, and has to adapt to make it possible for them to develop their capacities to the most. And I think that indeed, if you say that you aim to enable everyone to participate to the same level, that there's no meaningful difference between inclusion and integration for the education system. So, if we ask ourselves what is the importance of language in concerning participation, we have to acknowledge that our families are very different, that they know different languages, that they have a different proficiency in Germany. And we have also some regions or some quarters within the cities where there are other languages who are common enough to get by. So, for example, in some parts of Saxonia, you have the Sorbic language as a minority language, or in some quarters of Berlin, you can get by knowing Turkish very well. And if you have to Berlin, well, with English, it's not a problem to survive within the city, even to work. But concerning participation in the full sense of the word, there is no reasonable alternative to know German very well, since most or many professions only are open to you if you have the language skills. And since our work environments get more complex, this will continue and even rise. And I don't think that in the future there will be many jobs you can do without knowing German. Without knowing German well. So we have to do our best as educational institutions to ensure that everyone gets out knowing German pretty well. And we have to, and this is also true for German families, of course, since proficiency of German not only is linked to immigration status, but also to education level of parents. And German education system is infamous for being very bad at allowing for social change. The chances of being poor because your parents were poor are unfortunately very high. Yeah. And we have to recognize that in public debate there is a hierarchy in between different family languages. So if you've got an English-speaking family or French-speaking family, this is generally seen as an asset. And Arabic or Turkish-speaking families don't have the same luxury. This is often addressed as a problem. So if there weren't some racist undertones within this debate, we would have learned to talk about these additional language as an asset and as an immense potential for the children, but also in the economic sense. And we don't do that as a society. And this is, I think, a broader problem in much of the debate on migration and multiculturalism, that we tiptoe around the term racism. It's easy to explain, since racism is broadly seen as an individual moral failing. So if you're a racist, you're a bad person. But it isn't addressed as a structure of within the society, which works to keep some people away from participation and from power. But which isn't an individual failing, but something you integrate within your personality by being socialized, by going through socializing within this society. And this includes also that we as a society often use language as gatekeeping tool, and that the proficiency of language is also systematically used to ridicule or to keep out persons from positions of participation and power. This also isn't exclusively for immigration biographies. We've also got a broad variation of dialects within German, most of which are perfectly understandable for every native speaker. But even so, speaking dialect in a formal or professional setting can weaken your social status and can keep you from being taken completely seriously. So language as gatekeeping tool works within German as well, not only for accents from foreign people or non-native speakers, but also for dialects within the German language. Okay. So within our approach, the two core ideas are that we have to try to open the same possibilities to everyone to develop their capabilities, and this includes a strong stance on anti-discrimination. We have to, when I speak of the children, I think of the younger children, 1 to 6 or 3 to 6. We have to teach them to recognize injustice and to recognize unjust structures when they are victim or when others are victim of them, and to address them as such. Because with the generations who are already grown up, we often make the mistake to let them internalize the racism. So even the victims or the persons suffering, even them learn to internalize the different values instead of speaking out and to calling it as an injustice. So we already heard earlier that it is practically impossible to live without to stereotype or to cluster at least, to have some ideas of group in your head. That is true for teachers and educators as well. But you can continuously reflect which clusters do you use, which categories do you apply, and where do they come from, and if they contain racist stereotypes. We have to strengthen our children, to recognize and to call out this kind of injustice. And we have to invite the families to feel welcome in the same way. This is, I think, for our daycare centers, this is one of the most important lessons we learned during the last decades. It's not as much about knowing everything about every culture represented within represented within the daycare center, but it's much more about giving them the feeling the institution is meant for them as well as for every other family. And this is with small steps, we are enormously successful. And for the self-image of the families, this is something that cannot be overestimated. Yes. So I tried to summarize in answer to the leading question of the conference, what unites us in multicultural community, and I think all the points, which I now won't read out anymore, I think all the points relate to what I said before, and work work to sum up the main points of what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.